Hi, I'm Robin Santiago, a lifelong West Hartford resident and a retired dentist.
And I'm Kerry Rausch, also a long-term West Hartford resident. I am also one of the co-founders of Grassroots Jewish Women, and we are a group of women who came together after October 7th to support Israel, fight anti-Semitism, and support each other.
We share a deep concern in the alarming rise of Jew hatred in our beloved community and around the world. Together, we have this important opportunity to share our concerns and some information with you. Join us for another episode in this series, Shadows of Intolerance, Local and Global Perspectives on Anti-Semitism.
We are delighted to be working with the Department of Equity Advancement and the town's very own TV channel to bring you this program series to discuss the rise in Jew hatred that has escalated alarmingly since October 7th.
It is my pleasure today to introduce Edina Oestreicher. She brings her tenure as Executive Director of UCONN Hillel in June of 2020. A UCONN alum, 90, she brings over 25 years of experience serving in a variety of student affairs and capacities. Passionate about engaging the Jewish community, she served as a trainer for the Anti-Defamation League since 2006. She facilitates workshops on anti-Semitism, bias, and discrimination throughout Connecticut. She has been very active in her synagogue congregation, Or Shalom, in Orange, Connecticut.
And we also welcome Molly Myerson. Molly's currently a sophomore at the University of Connecticut and from Long Island, New York. She is studying to get a dual degree in American Sign Language Studies and Elementary Education with a concentration in English. Molly is also the current student board president of UCONN Hillel and prides herself in being a leader in the Jewish community on campus. Previously, she was the president of United Synagogue Youth Chapter at her temple, Plainville Jewish Center. She also previously taught Hebrew school at Plainville Jewish Center. In 2023, Molly was honored as the Federation of Jewish Men's Club Youth of the Year for all of her dedicated volunteer work, leadership, and involvement in her Jewish community and temple. Welcome.
Edina, can you tell us a little bit about your role as Executive Director of Hillel?
Absolutely, and thank you for having us today. So having the opportunity to work with wonderful young leaders like Molly, as you just heard a little bit about her, is truly an honor. Given the current climate, probably the most important and meaningful job that I have ever had. Being a young person today is difficult. A lot of pressures on young adults in college, and especially for young Jewish adults, given the climate, the uptick in anti-Semitism and anti-Israel rhetoric on campus and communities. And what I feel really proud of what Hillel does is to provide that sense of community and belonging for them, regardless of how they identify, Jewishly or as they're just exploring their identity. We have students who come in who've gone to Jewish day schools and maybe did a gap year in Israel, speak Hebrew, were bar mitzvah, were really very secure and solid in their identity, and students who maybe have done none of the sort of traditional rites, or milestones. We've had students who come in who just actually learned that they were Jewish, and are having the opportunity now to explore what Judaism means to them. And so that's what I love that Hillel does, provides all those opportunities, regardless of how students identify, where they are on their journey, that they feel at home, welcome. It's a place to explore their leadership skills, their religious identity, their cultural, social identity around Judaism, and just as they're developing as young people. So,
great.
Yeah.
Sounds like a very inclusive and welcoming environment.
Yes. And Molly, can you tell us a little bit what it's like being student president of Hillel at this time?
So being Hillel president obviously has a lot of responsibility that comes with it, especially in this day and age, but it's also a very rewarding experience to be one of the first people to welcome our first-year students on campus and help guide them through the college experience, but also to be their support system as they encounter their first anti-Semitic experience on campus, and to be the person to sit there and listen to, and then bring their concerns to the university and see the university take action and support the Jewish students on campus.
Wow, sounds like a lot, including your double major on top of everything else. Wow, we're lucky to have someone like you at UConn.
Thank you.
So, what has changed on campus since October 7th?
So, since October 7th, it was actually my second month on campus. I was a freshman that first semester. And before that, I came from a very Jewish town and never experienced anti-Semitism. And coming to a college campus, it wasn't the first thing on my mind that it was something I was going to have to deal with. And October 7th hit, and I remember sitting in my dorm room that night reading Yik Yak, which is an anonymous Twitter-like app for college students to use, and reading all of the comments that were going up there in response to President Merrick's stance on supporting Israel. And the comments that I were reading were very alarming to me. It was my first interaction with anti-Semitism firsthand. And I remember sitting there crying in my dorm. And I remember getting into a huge fight with my mom that week because from what I was seeing on college campuses and experiencing, I was mad at her for going to Temple, seeing that in my eyes, she was putting herself as a target. And she was very upset with me for not going to Hillel because I felt from what I was seeing on other college campuses that by entering a Jewish building on a campus, I would become a target.
Have you changed your opinion?
So definitely, my opinion has changed, and it took me about 2 weeks to go back to Hillel after October 7th, and I then was welcomed, and I found that instead of becoming a target, I found the community that I didn't know I need at college, and it was a very supportive and welcoming environment, a place where everyone knew what everyone was going through. There was that shared experience there of what was happening at UConn, and it was just a big family that was supporting each other. And so I took the step to join the student board as a freshman, and I oversaw the first year students of Hillel program. And then the following board term, became the president of the student board, and I didn't know how much I would be facing anti-Semitism being the president of Hillel. And at first it was very scary, but Hillel has so many resources that have turned me into a leader to advocate rather than stay very introverted and not speak up.
Edina, your job must have changed quite a bit since October 7th. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, of course. So, we always provide support for students regardless of what they need in terms of responding to anti-Semitic incidents. But of course, now we were dealing with that a lot more. And we we had very good relationships with the university administration, but started to work even more closely with them in terms of looking at institutional policies and guidelines. One thing that I think really benefited us, we had been a participant in something called the Campus Climate Initiative. It's a collaboration between Hillel International, UCONN Hillel, and senior leadership at the university, as well as the Academic Exchange Network, which is a faculty nonprofit. And we have been working actually since 2021 to look at policies, training, outreach. So we already had good frameworks and good relationships. So this helped us really leverage them to expand on what we needed to do in terms of working to expand outreach for training, particularly for administration and staff, which we continue to work on, working with student involvement with our Dean of Students Office to look at training for registered student organizations and other student leaders. One positive outcome, if you want to call it maybe a silver lining in all this, is we've actually, the last 2 years, had a 20% increase in our engagement. The numbers of students that come in, both those that come in just one time, and those that we call sort of high impact, and those that are that we see more than 6 times or are engaged in immersive or leadership roles, and those numbers have just exceeded our expectations. So I think students really, they want to be with other Jewish students. They want to lean into their Judaism or explore that. They want to be with staff who care about them, and so that's been really a positive outcome. The other piece, of course, as you can imagine, is we've really expanded our security. Our building has always been locked, and we have good relationships with the regional security advisor and UCONN police, and they've been helpful since I started there in 2020. But since October 7th, we've had additional assessments and trainings for our students. We now have UCONN police who we contract with for every Shabbat. We never did that before. Of course, that's an additional expense for our community, but one that I think is absolutely worth having. I think that presence there is key. It makes our students feel good, and most importantly, our families, donors, our community members know how seriously we take that. And we have a security committee. Molly is part of that we meet regularly to review our policies and ensure that we're meeting expectations and standards from our regional security advisor, and that our community feels safe coming in. Because if they don't feel safe, then you can't do anything else. That's the foundation upon which everything else rests.
I know that in conversations that we had before, one of the things that really stood out for me was how you talked about the manner in which you fight back.
So I can start. We teach all of the students in our community, when there is a protest or when there is something that is upsetting to you that you're seeing on campus, you don't engage with the protesters, you don't engage in the moment. You take it to university administration, you take it to UCONN Hillel staff, you take it to the UCONN Hillel student board, you take it to the leaders who can then peacefully and quietly respond rather than fighting back through protesting and screaming back at people, because 2 wrongs don't make a right, as people have learned since being children. And we don't fight being wronged by wronging other people. We'd rather take the high road and fight peacefully.
Awesome. I have the greatest respect for your approach. Yeah. And I know you spoke about how you found that so impactful for you too, seeing them in action.
Yeah, it's been incredibly moving. I mean, literally in the moment in spring of 2024, we had one of our Israel events in the middle of campus, and we had gone through all the proper procedures and had police there and reserved the space, and maybe half an hour into the event, a group of protesters from Students for Justice in Palestine showed up and basically screamed, harassed, and intimidated us for about an hour and a half. And it was extraordinary. I mean, it was very painful to be there in the moment, but what was really extraordinary to me was how our students, both the students who were involved in the organizing event as well as those that were just there to attend, they did not respond in any way and antagonize the individuals who were yelling. They just sort of walked right past. They came in and got food. They engaged with our students. We had artists there who were creating Israeli artwork and airbrush T-shirts, and they were just like, sort of nonplussed by it, which was really extraordinary. I'm not sure if I would have done the same thing at 18, but they were so mature and composed, and I think it really, for anybody there, it provided a stark contrast between how our students were responding to harassment and how they were antagonizing our community. And one of the, aside from that being just, I think, an incredible example of what Molly just shared was it led to a review of institutional policies around protests, around the use of amplified sound, around basic time, place, and manner for protests, and the role of the police, the role of student union and other staff on campus. I don't think there was as much clarity on it at that moment. So I'm sorry that it happened and that our community had to experience it. But again, there was a silver lining in that institutional policy has been now strengthened as a result, and I think has helped our community feel safer and stronger.
Great.
So, Molly, on a more personal level, have you felt that the war has impacted your relationships with your friends?
I think it has only impacted relationships and friendships in a positive way because it has only strengthened my relationships with more of my Jewish friends and my friends that I've found in Hillel. It has showed me who I can really trust with my emotional vulnerability, and it has also showed me and given me friends that who aren't Jewish, but I have seen have been very supportive and been an ally to the Jewish community that I've met through advocating for Jewish students on campus.
Very nice.
So one of the things we've heard about is that there have been issues regarding professors in classrooms where anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism that is irrelevant to the class material or the class being taught has surfaced. Is this something that you've experienced, and how have you handled it?
Definitely. I can speak to at least 3 instances that come to the top of my head right off the bat. To start, we did have an encampment on campus last spring in 2024, and we had a professor say to his class that he would dismiss the class so that way students could attend the encampment. And there was a Jewish student in that class who stood up and spoke out and said, "You can't end my time in this class and my educational experience to allow students to go protest. That's not fair to me as a student who pays to come here and get an education." And knowing that administration would feel the same way, the professor was forced to continue with class, and if students decided to leave to go to the encampment, it was on them to make up the work. We also had a student who received a blast email from one of her professors. I remember sitting in the building with her when she got the email, condemning university administration for taking a stance against the encampment and supporting all of the students that were setting up their tents and all of the students that were protesting on campus, which I know was very alarming for her, especially seeing that she then couldn't trust or be herself around that professor. She didn't feel comfortable in that class anymore. And then another situation that I heard arise from 2 of our students, one Jewish and one non-Jewish, is they were in a class taking a midterm. It was an international affairs class, and on the midterm, there was a question, what has Israel taught us? And the only correct multiple choice answer on the test was apartheid. If they marked any other answer on that question, they were marked wrong and got points off on their midterm.
Wow, that's distressing.
Definitely.
Can you talk a little bit about what BDS is and how it's manifested on campus?
Definitely. So BDS is the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanction Movement, which is very anti-Israel and targets Jewish students on campus. It is a movement in encouraging college campuses, companies, and businesses to divest and not support Israel as a state. And recently, we had a referendum come up where in the undergraduate student government where it was asked to the student government to promote it to all students to fill out this referendum to then present to the university to ask the university to divest from any support of Israel. Through these meetings that the referendum had to go to, the first one being a meeting that any undergraduate STORS fee-paying student could speak at and vote at, the conduct in that meeting was extremely unorderly, disrespectful, and uncomfortable to be in as a student on a college campus. I remember sitting there watching students from our community speak about how they had lost a friend that was murdered on October 7th in Israel and being laughed at and booed. There was a student that spoke up and connected the referendum at hand to BDS and the movement, and she was screamed over for the full 2 minutes of time she had to speak, and the timer was not stopped. She wasn't given extra time even though she couldn't speak through being screamed at, and you couldn't hear her with a microphone over the students that were screaming over her. And then I remember after that meeting, I was one of the only students from our community to stay and hear the final numbers, knowing that we lost just by looking at the support that the pro-referendum people had in the room. Knowing what the result was going to be, we just wanted to know the final numbers and what the total count was. And I stayed with one of my friends, and we stayed in our seat, didn't interact with anyone, didn't engage, and two men came and sat behind us and just stared at us for 2 minutes. I said to my friend, "Do you know who they are?" She said no. And so 2 minutes later, I said, "Do you want to leave?" And we got our backpacks and we stood up to leave. And with that, the two men sitting right behind us got up right after us and went to walk in the direction we were going to, at which point I refused to leave the room until they left, and I found a familiar face in the back of the room, and we stood there. But it was an intimidation tactic to intimidate Jewish students on campus that makes you not feel as safe on a college campus.
Wow.
And what kind of impact do you think this type of a referendum will have on the university?
So I know, as Edina said, we have a great connection with university administration, and I know where university administration stands on this point. Divesting from Israel is not in question for UCONN, and the only result of this referendum is that the university is going to say, no, we are not divesting, and it is going to increase the protests that we are seeing at UCONN. It is coming more as a statement and a demand at the university rather than asking students feedback. It is seen as a leverage to be able to protest and create the hostile environment that we had following October 7th and bring it back.
Wow. So I know there's DEI initiatives at most U.S. campuses. How has that been relevant to this situation? Has it been helpful?
In regards to the strong relationship that we have with the DEI office at UCONN, that office is we meet regularly and have met since I actually started here in 2020, because I think it's important for me to be that advocate for the Jewish community, because not all folks in the DEI space see the Jewish experience as being worthy of protection and outreach and education. And the current chief diversity officer at the university is wonderful. He's been in this role for just, I think, over a year and a half now, and has come to events, has come to our Seders, has come to Shabbat, eager to learn about the Jewish community and to also advocate. In fact, next week, I'm going to be a guest at the Board of Trustees Student Affairs Committee meeting to be able to answer questions and share information about the Jewish student experience for those Board of Trustees members. And that's a direct result of the DEI, this Chief Diversity Officer, the relationship I have with him, and working collaboratively to ensure that the experience of our students, our community, is shared and is part of the long-term comprehensive training and outreach that office does, whether it's helping to enhance communication around religious accommodations and holidays, which they've worked closely with us in the provost's office, to additional training and outreach, which we continue to work on. I think that's an area where there's real opportunity, as I've been working with Molly and some others with the Edina Students Office, work with the DEI office as well, because I think that is a place where we can improve what's already happening in terms of training students, staff, administration, and others on the campus.
Great. So you found it helpful.
Yes, very.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Well, we like to wrap up with a certain question each session, and that is, what gives you hope? Molly, can you start?
So I think what truly gives me hope now is seeing the community that is created. Even though we might be a targeted group on campus, it hasn't broken us apart. It has only made us stronger and come together, and seeing other students on campus also responding in a respectful manner and not screaming back at students. It gives me hope for the Jewish community in the future.
Awesome.
Well, what gives me hope are young leaders, young adults like Molly. I mean, I know when you signed up or got involved, you probably weren't thinking you'd be, addressing these types of issues, but to have watched you and your peers develop and be these extraordinarily composed and thoughtful, intelligent models of leadership, inspiring leadership, gives me hope, not just for what you and your peers are doing at UCONN now, but you are hopefully going to be the Jewish leaders of tomorrow, serving on boards and being lay leaders and working in the Jewish communal space, and that makes me really hopeful to know that the future of Judaism is sitting right here. The other thing that I do want to mention, because you just spoke about as well, is the bonds and the relationships that we're building with non-Jewish members of our community. I think that's really important. We can't do this alone. I think to have students who are advocates, who are allies, they may have just come because their boyfriend or girlfriend or a friend brought them for Shabbat or something, but they come back. A significant number of students who come in regularly, whether to just study or come to Shabbat, are not Jewish.
Wow.
And I think that's really important. We build relationships, we build allies. They learn from us, we learn from them. And I have to have a lot of hope in what they're sharing in their communities, that ripple effect about what they may be educating their others and dispelling myths about Judaism and Israel. It gives me hope for what they're doing beyond our space.
Well, I have to say, I think Kerry and I would agree that the sense of community that we have found, that we've had to build some new avenues, has really been a very big support for me in my life. And meeting people like you and hearing your advocacy, and it's been very inspiring.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for the work that you do in your communities. It's critical, and appreciate your including our voices in it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate everyone joining us for today's session.